So today's daf is Lamed Vav, this week's daf, and this is the beginning of sugyas of hachalitz. The Mishnah told us, spoke about somebody who did chalitza or yibum on a mu'uberes, and so he either didn't know she was a mu'uberes or knew and did it anyhow, whichever one, Rishi or not. The point is that he did a yibum or a chalitza on a isha mu'uberes. What was that? They did it on the Isha Mu'beres, and the question was, does that chalitza work if retroactively, if in the end that Ibur didn't last? If she had a miscarriage, does that retroactively say, oh, so then the Yibum took effect, even though that while she's Mu'beres, maybe she's going to have a child, and then and then she's not a Yevomos, and there would be an isser in that bia, or the chalitza wouldn't work because the chalitza was done on an isha that was already potter, retroactively. So Rabbi Yochanan says that it does work, and Rish Lakish says that it does not work. And the Gemara has a few rayas, and we're going to start with the raya that really goes into a big part of the halacha of Yevamah, of Yibum that we talked about from the beginning, and we'll see again here. So the Gemara, this is last... the 10 lines of Lamed Hey Amid Beis. Meisivei, we asked a question. Somebody did Yibum without waiting the amount of time to be able to tell whether or not she was pregnant, and turns out that she was pregnant. The tzara is not allowed to get married. The tzara, meaning the other wife of the deceased brother, is not allowed to get married. Maybe the child is going to survive, meaning it's going to be a viable birth. And if it's a viable birth, then this woman needs a chalitza, needs a yibum. So Gemara says, of course, that's makes no sense. If the child is actually a viable birth, then there's no yibum at all, right? Then for sure she's potter. She doesn't need anything. Why can't she marry anybody in the street? Of course she can. Rather, it's maybe the fetus will not survive. Maybe it's not going to be a viable birth. And if it's not a viable birth, that means retroactively there's a yibum needed here, and therefore the tzara cannot get married. So Rish Lakish says, let's figure this out. If you, Rabbi Yochanan, you are right that retroactively the yibum that he did worked, so then there's no more yibum needed. Why can't the tzara marry someone? She can. The yibum is all done. Somebody has already reestablished the household of the deceased brother. Somebody already did it. Bias echad will make him, and not another, and then we're done. The tzara is going to be potter. So if you are right that retroactively the yibum took effect, so if it's non-viable, if the fetus doesn't survive, so then it's a good retroactively a good yibum. And if the child does survive, so then there's no yibum needed at all. So this woman should now be able to get married even before a child comes. And from the fact that the Mishnah said that you can't is a raya that the yibum. Sorry. The Brisa says the tzara may not get married. She has to wait and see whether there's a child born or not. What does she have to wait for? If the child turns out to be a viable child, so then there's no yibum needed at all. He died leaving a child. And if it turns out retroactively it's not a child, so retroactively the first yibum he did worked. And so she's potter anyhow. So why, according to Rabbi Yochanan, why do you need this? According to Rish Lakish, it makes sense. Because Rish Lakish says maybe the child's not going to survive. And retroactively, there was no yibum chalitza because she was mu'beres. She was in the middle of producing a child. So there's no yibum needed at that point. So the yibum didn't work, and now when the child dies in childbirth, is a stillborn or whatever it is, so then you properly need a new yibum, and then either one of them can have that yibum. So that's why the tzara can't marry, because she still needs chalitza. So that's the kasha. Amar Abaye. So Abaye comes up with a tremendous chiddush. Amar Abaye b'bia kula alma lepligi de lepatra. Of course, the bia, if they did a yibum, if he did a yibum with this woman, everybody agrees retroactively that's not going to become a good yibum, and you need a new yibum. Only chalitza is going to work retroactively. We're going to say chalitza muberes shma chalitza, but bia muberes loishma bia. Reish Lakish bia muberes loishma bia, and chalitza muberes loishma bia. So Reish Lakish holds that both are not going to work retroactively, and Rabbi Yochanan only says that the bia doesn't count retroactively, the yibum doesn't count retroactively, but chalitza does count retroactively. We're going to have to see a svara, what's pshat in Abaye, that Abaye says this vart, that the chalitza works retroactively, but not the bia. Either way, you're going to have to know, the logic is going to have to make sense. Before, the Gemara said, what's the reasoning of Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan? Rabbi Yochanan had either a svara or a pasuk. Either a svara, he said, look, if Eliyahu had come and told us this child is never going to survive, right? So then child never going to survive. So so there you can do yibum right away. So now that the child didn't survive, retroactively it was a good yibum. That's his logic. So where does that change right now? Why would that change right now? Also, he says that there's a pasuk. He said ubein ein lo. He doesn't have a child. Well, he doesn't have a child, right? Reish Lakish says, no, of course it works, because the pasuk says, bein ein lo ayin olav, ein lo meaning you have to look and see, what does he have a child, and you can see that it's going to come. That's enough. And the retroactive, Reish Lakish says, no, it counts as, we don't say gloi milsel mafreya. We don't say that what you could have known. At the time, you didn't have a right to do yibum.
Do you need to come up with a mahala when you say the pasuk? If you say that he just got it from the pasuk.
What do you mean he got it from a pasuk?
If you work with that, Rabbi Yochanan learned out that yibum are supposed to work from Afreya from the fact that the pasuk says bein inlo, right? That the gather bands, then you just darshan the pasuk says that talking about.
That's going to need an explanation. Why would the pasuk be talking about one and not the other?
The pasuk is from talking about yibum. Was that backwards?
It's quite the contrary. If it's talking about yibum, then for sure yibum should be okay.
Okay, but I'm saying that then it wouldn't.
It's hard to say that the pasuk.
Something along the lines of how you darshan the pasuk.
Oh, okay, so that needs an explanation. How do you get there? Because the ma'aseh of the pasuk says, if somebody dies, ubein ein loy, then his wife cannot marry, and you need ibum. And it says bein ein loy, and that's what he's saying. Ein loy he doesn't have, and right now he doesn't have. So yibum you cannot do, chalitza you can do. What's pshat? So we're going to need an explanation for that. Even more so, we're going to need an explanation what's pshat in Abaye, because Rav asks a very good question on Abaye.
Do you have to fit what they're saying in the way the Gemara explained the machlokas before? Because I think that it wasn't them. There was a Tosfos that it wasn't really them speaking, like it was the Gemara speaking on their behalf, right? So can we say that based on this now we're Reb Yochanan's svara of Igli Milsma Freya and the way you learn from Psukim that's not, maybe we need a new mahalach now.
Great. So what's the mahalach? Agreed. So what is the mahalach?
I don't know. I'm just saying that we really have to fit it in with. I'm just saying that we're not beholden to fit it in with the explanations that it was saying before.
Fair enough. But however, we're going to have an explanation as to why retroactively chalitza works, but retroactively yibum does not work.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Rava asked another question. Amalei Rava manavshach. Ibia muberes shma bia chalitza muberes shma chalitza. Vibia muberes lishma bia chalitza muberes nami lishma chalitza. He says this argument like either both work or both don't work, but he has it from a halacha that we know. A general halacha we say the hakaimalan is the beginning of Lamed Vav Amud Aleph. This is a general rule we saw from the beginning. That what's the what? That everything they represent each other. If there's yibum, there's chalitza, and if there's no chalitza, there's no yibum. They go together because they, as the Rashi says in the beginning of the Masechta in Av Gimel, Rashi says because what's the basis for yibum? Zika. And how do you end the zika? Chalitza. So if there's no need for chalitza, that means that there's no zika. If there's no zika, then there's no yibum. And if there's yibum, that means there's zika. That means that the dead brother's marriage was passed over to him. If it's passed over, if there's a zika for yibum, then there has to be chalitza as well. It's either or. You can't have one is a chiyuv and one is not a chiyuv.
Embarrassed, what chalitza wouldn't do any harm. Chalitza wouldn't do any harm to the woman. You can't be half where either you are or you're not. Somebody performed yibum, and then retroactive as a viable child, then there's going to be a big problem.
And therefore,
that's why chalitza can be allowed in a situation like this. I mean, yibum will not.
So this is the way Tosfos is explaining. This is basically what Tosfos is saying. Tosfos is saying, of course, it's a lachatchila din. Meaning, we can't allow for a yibum to work because then he's going to go ahead and do a yibum, and that's taking a really dangerous risk. Because if he does yibum and the child is viable, he's just had relations with his sister-in-law. That's also not in the mitzvah. So we can't let that happen retroactively because then he may do it. Whereas chalitza, there's no loss. Chalitza, big deal. Right? What's going to happen? He may end up doing chalitza lechatchila. So do chalitza lechatchila. Nothing happened. Meaning, according to Rabbi Yochanan, we're going to have to say the zika is there right away. And that it's a derabanan. That's the way the Mefarshim are learning this.
So Rabbi Yochanan, according to this, Rabbi Yochanan would still say that yes, we embarrass Mavia, that it's still, but we're going to prevent it. We're going to say you're not allowed because
Shema Yavai.
The consequences are dire.
Right, as Tosfos says, Bia Maida Shalay Yavai L'dei Yisur. He doesn't want him to get into a chance of getting an issue. That's a problem. That's the way Tosfos learns. Right? Why is he moida by bia? Maybe he's going to get into an isser. You're laughing at me. What's going on there?
No, I realized I read that Tosfos wrong. I didn't understand it, so I'm happy you said that.
All right. So like Charlie said, there's a big difference. So what's Rava's response to that? Why is Rava not holding of that? Yeah. So Rava,
One goes with the other.
I understand, but he's not responding to Abaya's point. Then Abaya is saying, what do we say? Abaya is saying. Abaya is saying. Actually, they both really, there's a real zika. There's a real zika. V'choshesh mid'Rabbanan, yeah, it's too dangerous. Rava says, wait, if it's Eilul Yibum, it's Eilul Zika. If it's Eilul Yibum, it's Eilul Chalitza. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course, as you just explained, I made it that there's a zika. I made it there's Yibum and Chalitza. I'm just telling you, don't do it. It's too dangerous. That's not like saying you can't do the yibum. The yibum is going to work. What you just said was really the yibum works. You're right. the yibum works, the chalitza works. Just we're not going to let you do it because you're going to get into dangerous territory. So Rava comes and says, excuse me, we have a general rule. We know you haven't addressed my point. Rava's not addressing Abaya's point. Abaya is not saying there's no Zika. Okay?
Isn't it worse also because if we're learning a whole their opponent, then you can't cash on the direct rule. We know that in the direct rules, anyone gets even after place. Anyone who doesn't get like those two things together. Direct rules. He's not saying a direct rule.
That's right. So what's Abaya? So what's Rava?
There's still a risk of doing chalitza too. It's just very minor. There's still a risk of letting the guy doing chalitza. It finds out that Yevomos is really allowed and but then he might go along and do it. Right now he doesn't know. So
you're saying Rava is really not saying the regular din of that there's no Zika. Okay. So there are other pirushim here. You got it? So the Ritva says that the reason over here that it doesn't work is he has to, because of this question, he says it's really the oraisa. Charlie's argument, but in a oraisa. Takes it one step further. He says, what's by bia that you're doing an isser? You cannot make a kinyan of yibum with an isser. It's an isser d'oraisa. Therefore, you cannot make a kinyan yibum. Chalitza has no isser attached to it, so that can take effect. In other words, not that there's a gzeira d'Rabbanan, the way Tosa seems to say, shelo yavai lidei isser. So no, the act is an act of isser. You cannot fulfill a mitzvah with the isser. Or to word it differently, the way some achronim word it is, what's pshat? You're going to be kaina in the yibum in because the Torah wants you to fulfill this. No, the Torah is actually telling you don't do it. You can't fulfill the yibum with such a thing, with such an isser. And essentially, the kinyan of yibum is not a normal marriage. If it was a normal marriage, you could say, look, I did kiddushin. We find such a thing that with a chayve lavin, kiddushin types of a chayve lavin, even though that you're doing an isser, you're not allowed to do this marriage, but it takes effect because you're doing a complete kinyan. But over here, this is not a normal kinyan. The kinyan of bia by yibum is a special chiddush that even though there's a erva, we're going to pass the marriage of the brother over, and you are allowed to now continue that marriage through bia. But over here, the Torah is saying, I don't let you do it because she's a mu'beres. I don't let you do it, so therefore it's not going to work. And essentially, the way the Ritva seems to be saying is that really, Rabbi Yochanan is made to the chash of ubein ein loy ayin alav. That really you have to still have, you have to know that there's no children. Chalitza, the Torah doesn't block, but yibum, the Torah is going to block, and it's it's going to be even retroactively, it's not going to work. Chalitza will work because chalitza is no isser, so that can make a ma'isa kinyan, or the undoing of the kinyan can happen because there's no isser involved. The Ramban.
Does Rava's kasha make sense then, if that's what Abaya is saying?
Yeah, and then Rava's kasha makes a lot of sense because Rava is saying it can't be that the Torah is allowing you to do a yibum. Sorry, the Torah is not allowing you to do yibum, meaning saying that there's an issa d'oraisa here on this bia, but yet chalitza is going to work. Kol she'ein oila liyibum, if the Torah is saying that you cannot make a kinyan here, so then you also can't undo the kinyan.
Yeah. As opposed to... Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll explain a little more as we'll see in a moment, because really there's a difference in the meaning of Rava in any case. The Ramban has a different explanation. in the same vein of where he says that vein ein lo ayin alav, and the idea is that really there's a Tosfos Rush later in Daf Mem Aleph. Tosfos Rush holds that Reish Lakish. What was Reish Lakish's shot? Reish Lakish says, you know why it doesn't work retroactively? Because the Torah says ubein ein loy, and he doesn't have a son, and the meaning of that is a drash ayin olav. Not he doesn't have one now, but you have to use your mind and see, is there a child coming? Ayin, you have to see, meaning that ein loy, you have to know whether the child's coming. What's that going on? That's an exemption on yibum alone, only on yibum, not on chalitza. Chalitza comes as a secondary thing. The Torah says you can't do yibum if there's a child coming. Now, if you can't do yibum, kol she'eino ela yibum, eino ela chalitza. That's the way the Tosfos Rush explains Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan is going to say the same. However, he says it only applies to yibum and it doesn't apply to chalitza. And Rava then asks, wait, but we have a din of kol she'eino ela yibum, eino ela chalitza. So I want to look at the first Rashi on the Amid and point out that Rashi over here says a different explanation for kol she'eino ela yibum, eino ela chalitza. It's not my point in Rashi. Rabbi Chanan and all the Achronim, the Rashi Yeshiva, point out this difference in Rashi. The Gemara says, kol she'eino ela yibum, eino ela chalitza. This is on Daf Gimel Amid Aleph. If you look at Daf Gimel Amid Aleph, Rashi and kol she'eino ela yibum, eino ela chalitza. Rashi says, Zikas yibum.
Where is it?
Last lines of Rashi. Give me 1 second. Fourth to last line. So he said, "The chola oila lezikas yibum oila lezikas chalitza v'chein she'oina lezikas yibum pturim min chalitza." So Rashi says that the point of yibum of this point is there's a zika, there's the marriage from the brother is passed on. There's now a shibud between this woman, the widow, and the surviving brother, and if there is such a zika, then you can do yibum. And if there's no zika, you don't need chalitza, because chalitza is there to undo the zika. Look in our Rashi. The chala oila liyibum oila chalitza. Kala oila liyibum debi asa peitrasa. Anybody that yibum will exempt the other. That's what it does. The chalitza also will exempt as well. Why is Rashi changing the meaning of kol oila yibum oila chalitza? So over there he says it's either there's zika or there's no zika, right? Here he doesn't say that it's based on whether there's zika or not. He says yibum and chalitza are going to exempt, it's going to pater. Now, that means there is a zika. It's just a question whether it can end the zika. Why are you saying that? Why is there a change? So the Achronim basically say in various different forms, this one nakuda, which is the var. That really, at this point, there has to be Zika. Everybody's in Zika. He died childless. As the Gemara tells us later, that even a live birth is not going to exempt until the birth, right? The Vart is, everybody agrees there's Zika at this point. There's a Zika. It's only a question, will the act of Yibum exempt that Zika, end that Zika? And if it does, then Chalitza should too. And if Chalitza doesn't, then Yibum should. That's what it.
Why is there definitely a Zika?
There's definitely a Zika because there's no child yet.
But she could be pregnant.
Even if she's pregnant, that's the saying is.
Until there's a live child, the Zika is going to be there. I'm not going to say, that's what I was saying before. It's not that you don't have a Zika, and then, there's Mabolas, now the Zika comes back.
I don't understand.
They'll explain it here. They ask it in a question that's even worse.
I understand the theory, but at the same time, Hashem also created the fetus, and the fetus, there's already an idea in the world whether the fetus is going to exist in the future.
Great. So here's the way they say it to prove it. The halacha is, we saw this earlier, that any time at the moment of death, there's no Zika, there's no Yibum, Chiyuv Yibum, it never comes. And the reason is because really there's a Eishes Ach. She's the wife of a brother. She is an erva. What happens when he dies? Instead of the marriage ending, the marriage continues to the brother. That's called Zika. So the Eishes Ach sort of goes away. But if at the moment of his death, there's no Zika, there's no mitzvahs Yibum, so that means at the moment of the Misa, there was a Eishes Ach. That never goes away anymore. How's it going to go away a month later when she has a miscarriage? 2 months later when she has a miscarriage, how does it go away? She's already an Eishes Ach. If it's L'mafreya, that means it was a Zika.
We don't do that.
There was a Zika then. That means there was a Zika. So it has to be that they prove it with more proofs also. It seems pretty clear that it has to be, the Vart is not that there's no Zika. There is a Zika. But you can't do anything for the Zika. And that's why he says, if the act that you do on this is enough to end the Zika, then it should end it both ways. Either Chalitza can end it, and then Yibum can also end it. And if Yibum can end it, Chalitza also can't end it. One or the other. So the idea is that we now have a new type of Zika. A new type of Oilel Yibum Oilel Chalitza. A separate din of Oilel Yibum Oilel Chalitza that's different than we had before. And so to that, Rabbi Yochanan says, I don't hold to that. That part I don't hold of. And that's the way they explain why Rabbi Yochanan says, I hold of Yibum. I hold of the Zika, but the Yibum can't end it. The Yibum can't end it because the Yibum is Issa D'Oraisa. The Torah doesn't let it take effect. And the Chalitza could end it. The Chalitza can end the Zika, and the Yibum can't end the Zika. So therefore, the Chalitza retroactively worked, and the Yibum doesn't. What's your question? But you've created a new type, Rabbi. And Abai says, I don't have this new type. Or Rabbi Yochanan doesn't have this new type. Because it's a new type of Eino El Yibum, Eino El Chalitza. Yeah, Max?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's really a big sugya here. There's also an explanation of the first Tosfos, who also deals with Eino El Yibum, Eino El Chalitza. We're going to run out of time. I want to see some other things, so we're going to leave that for now.
At the end of the day, if this situation occurs, are we going to say you have to wait till the child is born in order for the Tzara to be Tzura?
Everybody has to wait. Everything's on hold. until the pregnancy,
We don't cast.
And, or it's proven that the woman's not.
or it's proven that she's not pregnant, or until the pregnancy, becomes viable. Yeah.
And if there was a you or a done, it has to be redone.
Right.
At that point, it doesn't really.
Right. It is. We paskin like Reish Lakish. One of the 3 times we paskin like Reish Lakish. I don't want to be geschmack to see some of the other 2 because there are interesting halachas in regards to the other 2. The Gemara says there are 3 times that we paskin like Reish Lakish. Here. The last few lines of the Yomit. Chada Hada Amra. Over here, Allah is like Reish Lakish. And another 2. Idach de Tanan. Hamachalek nechasav al piv. Somebody who writes a will. Okay, she's doing a living will, and riba leechad amid leechad v'hishva lehem es habachor. He's doing 2 things that the Torah didn't allow, or not the way the Torah said it. And the interesting thing is, Rashi points out that there are 2 problems here. Riba le'echad ami le'echad v'yishbe le'es b'chor dvar v'kayamin. The kula nasa mechayev. He gave it to everybody in his lifetime. The inkan Yerusha. He's not doing it as a Yerusha. Now, there's a machlekes over there in the Gemara whether he's allowed to use the term Yerusha or not, right? But he didn't do it as a Yerusha. Lito b'chora. So number 1, therefore the b'chor doesn't get double. V'lei pshutim lito b'shavet. And also that the pshutim, the non-b'chor, would take equal. So we see in Rashi there are 2 separate dinim here that really are supposed to happen. The b'chor is supposed to get the double, and you're not supposed to undo that in a Yerusha, but you can gift it to anybody you want. You can give a gift, but you can't do Yerusha. So that's din number 1. The pshutim have to get equal, and the b'chor has to get double, and that the pshutim should get equal. You shouldn't give one more than the other. However, since he gave it as a gift, not as a Yerusha, masha riba, masha miyat. What he did essentially takes effect. If he said the word Yerusha, it's not going to work. Amar klum kasav if he wrote anywhere, he didn't say a word, but he wrote somewhere in it. He wrote as a matana. It's not going to work. It doesn't count. Why? This is the if he says Yerusha. Rashi says she hisna masha kasabater. He's masna masha kasabater. He contradicted the Torah by making it tonight, and we know masna masha kasabater tonight batal saloy amaklum. But if he writes it as a matana, dvarav kayamin. And on that, Reish Lakish says. He has to specifically give out a field and it has to be that he said it in a lashon matana. So there, in doing so, he's done 2 things. Now, he's gave out a specific field. The question is, can he do this, give out specific fields if they are equal in value? He's not putting one over the other, but he wants to specifically give out fields. So the stam lashon of the Gemara, it seems that from Reish Lakish that he has to say this field to this one, this field to this one as a gift. It's mashma, even if they're worth equal. He doesn't say because they're worth different values. It has to say, I give you this b'matana. However, the Achronim want to point out from Rashi, Rashi's problem, it says that the problem is because he's masna mashakaz b'Torah in that he was loy mashve. Not because he made it not a gift. He made it not a Yerusha because he divvied out, and Yerusha is supposed to be divided by themselves, but rather because he made it not equal. So if they're equal, he says you get $100,000 from the property in the Northwest, and you get $100,000 from the property in the Southeast. That's going to be okay because he gave them equal. That wouldn't be a masna masha because of Torah. That would not be a contradiction to Yerusha, even though Yerusha essentially is that it's an inheritance, and then you get equal partnership and you divide it. Giving specific would be okay as long as it's not contradictory to the Shavah B'Shavah.
Why is that a chiddush?
It's a chiddush in the Lashon Rish Lakish. Rish Lakish seems to say that even if you're going to say a Yerusha, if you say just Sada Pliny LaPliny and Sada Pliny LaPliny, it's going to be awesome. That's not going to work. Only if you say it as a, right? He says, only because I gifted it to them now.
The whole is not whether or not it's a matana. The question is whether we can pick up and wash it.
No, if he didn't give it as a matana, if he just said Yerusha.
Rashi said the point is that if he uses the other sheet is that if he says some are matana, some are Yerusha, then we catch it up and we say once he uses lashon matana for some, they're all matana. Rashi says no, he has to each and everything has to
Has to be matana, right?
It's only just then catching up his words, right? Meaning meaning the other sheet is that he just intended matana. Rashi is saying that like we can't touch up his words, so therefore not like.
But Rish Lakish, he doesn't say there's a difference in value. He's just saying that's the chiddush is that Rish Lakish is not saying a Sada Pliny of worth 400 goes to him, and Sada Pliny that's worth 200 goes to him b'matana. That it all has to be matana, right? But he also doesn't say that there's a value at all. He just says Sada Pliny, Sada Pliny, but matana works with that. Meaning, if I said Yerusha, and I just said you get this field, you get that field, it wouldn't make a difference whether they're the same value or not. Also, Bachar. By Bachar, what's the din of Bachar that he gets that he gets a Pishnayim? So the second part of Bachar is different than regular Yerusha. A Yerusha, everybody equally gets all assets that are in hand as well as receivables. What's possible to come. Bachar only gets double in the muchsak. So the Gemara in Babasa says the reason is because it's a matana carrier rachmana. The double portion that the Bechor gets is really only a gift. So I may have thought, and this is to Max's question, so Tesa says I may have thought it's a matana. So since it in of itself is a matana, so I'm allowed to it's not a part of Yerusha. I can't diminish Yerusha. But Bechor, the double portion of Bechor is not Yerusha. The Gemara says it's called a matana. So maybe that I can undo. That it says also, the Rashi says, there's on the Pishnayim as well. You cannot undo the Pishnayim. You have to still, lo yochel levaker, you have to be able to give the Bechor each portion. The next din is so he writes to his son, I gift you everything la'achamaisei. Mikana la'ba, it's a gift to you. And the son sells his portion in it. It's an interesting din. If the son sells his portion and outlives his father, it's retroactively a sale. If the son dies in the lifetime of the father, it's not a retroactive sale. So what's pshat? So the emes is, the Gemara says, the father can't sell, he gave it to the son. If the father sells it until he dies, it's sold. If the son sold it, then the buyer has nothing until the father dies. Why? That what did the father retain for himself? When the father says, from today and on, this is your field, after death, what that means is the kinyan aguf, the kinyan, he retains the kinyan paris. The body of the field is yours, my son. Well, what I retain is the right to paris, whatever produce, whatever I can rent out, whatever fruit that grows on it, that's going to be mine. That's kinyan paris. Rabbi Yochanan holds kinyan paris. The rights to the fruit is actually kinyan aguf. The father still retains the rights to the field itself, and therefore the son sold nothing. Rish Lakish Amar kana lekeach kinyan paris lav kinyan aguf. When the father retained the rights to the produce, he didn't actually retain the rights to the body. This is kinyan paris is lav kinyan aguf. The body of the field belongs to the son. The question is, so then when the son sold it, why does it not take effect? Even if he died b'chaya'av, even if it died in the lifetime of the father, it should take effect because after all, he owns this field. So why does, according to Rish Lakish, why does it not take effect? And why, if he outlives his father, retroactively, the mechira takes effect? So Rashi says, Shekasa mehayoim ula achamisa. He writes, it's yours from today, ula achamisa. That's the language. It is yours today, taking effect after death. So there's a general rule we know that that a person doesn't have that in makna you can't be kind of makna you can't sell something that doesn't exist. It's loy bala. So the father has rights to the produce. The produce doesn't exist. So how can he sell anything here? The father doesn't own that. How come he sells it even up until the death? He has no rights to it, and the fruit don't live. So the Gemara tells us that even though we say you can't sell something, or you can't make acquisitions about things that don't exist in the world, but you can sell peiros, dekel lepeiros, a palm tree for its fruit. So I'm selling you the palm tree, so that already exists, but I don't sell the palm tree as a whole. I only sell to you for the rights of the fruit that's in there. That means be'emes, when we look at any item that you buy, you have all the rights to it. You can destroy it, you can utilize it, you can hold it, you can do nothing with it. That's the rights that you have when you buy it. But when I can sell something to you for a specific usage, that's dekel. I'm selling you the palm tree, but you can't cut it down. You can't use the branches. Dekel lepeiroso. I give you the dekel, the fruit, the tree for its fruits. That's a way to sell something that's shaloi bala oil. Even though that it's not, the fruits are not here, but I'm not selling you the fruits. I'm selling you the tree for its fruits. Same over here. The father, when he retains the field, he's retaining the field for its produce. That's the way Rabbi Tzvi Fischer explains it in Tshuva in Tinyana Peches. That he's retaining the fruit, he's retaining, the field, the karka, lepeirosav, for what's going to grow in it. So he actually retains a chelek of the karka itself. Now, even though if he retained the karka, so then how does it? In what way is it the son's? The field, the rest of the rights, meaning the body of the rights of the field, belong to the son. The rights of the fruit in the field, or from the field, that's what he's keeping for himself.
What can you do with the body?
The son, he can't do anything right now, but he owns its futures in a certain sense. He's owning the rights to the.
Anything that now that will retroactively what would actually happen? You don't have it. The sale would happen. That would be in the future. It wouldn't take place starting.
Why does it take place retroactively if he outlives his father?
Well, not why does it take place, but what's the difference between whether it takes place retroactively or not? There was something that really he didn't really own anything. But this move is worthless retroactively because everything that came from the field was the father's anyway.
No, it's sort of like when you own real estate. Okay, so you own property, but you've leased it out. So there's nothing you can do with it because you've leased it out. But the body's yours.
Then the son owns just the value.
He owns the dirt. He owns the dirt. He
doesn't
can't
own
live
the
in
dirt
there.
either. He doesn't own the dirt either because he can't start changing the soil because the father owns the dirt.
Because the usage, right? The usage belongs to someone else, but the dirt itself is his. It's like the tree. I can't cut down the tree because I sold the fruits to you. You can't cut down the tree because that's not what you bought. I thought you were asking if the father owns the usage right now, in what way does the sale retroactively take effect? I don't have it to sell. Right? That's what Gemara says. So how can I even make a sale retroactively? I don't have it. So there's a din of ma machar risha l'sheni kol zchus shetava liyodeh. When I make a sale to you, it's not only what I already have, but any rights that come along with this sale. So when I give you something, when I sell something to you, ma machar risha l'sheni, what does A sell to B when he makes a sale? Any value or any rights that come along with this. So if the son himself outlives the father, so then retroactively, he had the rights to this field. So that's what he was able to sell. Whatever would come to me is what I give you. So I'm going to give you, so he sold to him something that's going to come. If he outlives his father, we now know that it actually was going to come to him. So that's why he can sell it. Whereas if he died before the father, it actually never came to him. It never would come to him. No, there's no, yeah, he gave, the goof would have been there, but he couldn't sell it because it never actually came to him. It never actually got to that point where it became his. Because it becomes his la'achar misa. Mehayoim or la'achar misa. So it's going to become his la'achar misa. It never actually got to that point. So he sold him, essentially what he's doing is he's selling him futures that never materialized. If it materializes, so then then he got it, right? But it never materialized. So he says, I'm selling to you something that when this point hits, it becomes mine. If it actually hits, that's a right he has. But if it never hit, he never hit that right. It never attained that zchus.
Very Lakish, how does the sale work?
Right, like a lady selling the value of the ksuba, but you don't know if it'll ever become because she may die first. You know what I'd say, Rish Lakish?
How does the sale work? When the son dies first.
If the son dies first, it doesn't work according to Rish Lakish, right?
No, he's Amar Kana Lokeach.
If the son sold the field to somebody, just
Yeah.
right? Can he still collect that money? Was that illegal money to collect? Just like you sell it to when they take the market value of the super based on whether he's going to die first. The same way, can he sell the field to somebody, right? Collect money, and then the guy is doing the same thing, gambling whether the father or the son is going to die first. Almost like, you're saying you can buy retroactively, right? But
Yeah.
I guess so is there any issue for the son taking that sale to take the money, to sell it?
According to Rish Lakish, or if he has the body of the karka.
Or he's gonna get the body after the death, after his father died.
Yeah, that's even Rabbi Yochanan is going to say that counts as a good mechira, right? That counts as a good sale because at the time of he's going to outlive the father, so it's ultimately what?
It's possible he's gonna outlive the father. We don't know if he's gonna outlive the father.
If he outlives the father, so then we now know that he actually has the karka. Right, he sold him the rights that he has. If he has them, the kinyan aguf. Rish Lakish, who holds that kinyan peiros lavka kinyan aguf, so then he has from the start he has the kinyan haguf itself. Is that what you were saying?
I'm just asking, how was Rabbi Akiva ever explaining Rish Lakish, or was he explaining Rabbi Yochanan?
He would say, according to Rabbi Yochanan, that there's a split between whether he survives a father or not. Why would there be a split of whether he survives a father or not?
I thought that was explaining Rish Lakish. That's why I was confused. Okay.
No. Why would it? If he doesn't survive the father, then it's not a mechira. If he survives the father, it is a mechira. Right? Okay. One more piece of Gemara. The Gemara says, if the child's not going to, the Mishnah said, if the child's not going to survive, so then it could be retroactive. So Tana Mishum Rabbi Eliezer Amru Yotzi Beget. So this person did at the end of the Mishnah, which said, if the child doesn't survive, so Yekayim, so then he can remain married to her. And he says, no, even though the child doesn't survive, that there's a knas. There's a knas that he has to divorce this wife. Yitzia beget, mishum the nichnas l'safik yisur, because he took the chance of marrying a woman that was his brother's wife, not knowing whether there's going to be a chiyuv of Yibam or not. He took the chance. So even though he turned out right, he has to divorce her. He's not allowed to keep her because he took a chance. It's a knas. It's enough to do the get without chalitza. Now wait. So everybody asks, what are you talking about? That you don't need chalitza? The yibum he made didn't work. We just said we paskin like Rish Lakish. We paskin like Rish Lakish that if he did yibum while she was pregnant, that the yibum didn't work. So not only does she need a get, she also needs chalitza because there never was a yibum. So when does get work? If the yibum was a good yibum, so it's a regular wife, so get is going to work. But if you're telling me Rish Lakish says that the yibum that was done while she was pregnant doesn't count, so if we say she's not allowed to be kept as a yibum because of as a knas for having taken such a chance, so then you need a get and chalitza. So
she said earlier that it wouldn't even work. Actually, earlier than Rish Lakish at that point, the only choice is you can't get rid of get and you can't get rid of chalitza because you have to do it.
why can't you do chalitza?
Once you already did dios, we're not going to let you get out. You have to finish it.
We're not, because we're not going to let you. That's not that chalitza doesn't work.
Okay, so
In that shita, but Rabbi Eliezer says, no, we're not going to let you do yibum. He says the other. We're not going to let you do yibum because we're not going to give you the reward for having done an avera. So the Tosfos Shanim on the side asks this question. Move Tosfos Shanim here. So Rashi had the girsa that the yotzi. Persha kunjas a kansino lay, have a chalitza lay tzarich. The tema, the paskina Allah Rish Lakish. Dama biyas mubaras l'shma biyam ken gam chalitza tzarich. So he says you do need chalitza. According to Rish Lakish, you need chalitza. So then what do you need a get for? So if you need chalitza, so what do you need a get for? But the bia didn't work according to Rish Lakish.
It works a little bit for you. Providing enough that you can't like I said, you can't do it to work at earlier because you stuck in the middle. You already did something with the bia, so you can finish it, but you can't.
So that could be a achrayas that he has to do. But basically along the lines of what they're saying, that we know that in Yibum there's a concept of maimer. There are rabbanan kiddushin. That even though there is no such concept, you either do Yibum or you do chalitza. But if somebody did maimer, then you have to undo the maimer with the get. So if somebody went to a Yevomos, all right, to his Yevomos, and said Areach Mekadesh Asli, and it'll knock out the other brothers, but then he can only can do Yibum. But if he chooses to do chalitza, he now also needs a get. He needs a get because he did a kiddushin, a maimer. One of the ways to do kiddushin is bia. So he essentially did a maimer here, even though the bia didn't work as a yibum, but the bia works as a maimer, as a type of kiddushin in a yavama, and mamela, he needs a get for that. That's the way they're going to learn.